Okay, so we are recording.
Great.
Sorry. Let's see. Okay. All right. So yes, today we're going to be talking about co-op, mostly for the spring. Like I said, my name is Rita Kalinowski. I'm co-op and career advisor. That is my contact information there. So if you have any questions afterwards, you can reach out to me or whoever your career advisor is. And there's Jean Marie's information as well as Dina Rubin, who's the assistant director for International Student Services. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about information that you need to succeed in the American job search. You'll learn about the process of getting permission to work in the United States, as well as the deadlines for spring, and find out how to obtain a social security number. So in terms of your search for co-op, the first thing you want to do is meet with your co-op and career advisor for advice for your search. And you can schedule that through WhitWorks or by calling our office number, and I'll show that at the end of the presentation. And then you also need to register for co-op in Leopard Web and report your hire in WhitWorks once you've secured a co-op. And then you'll need to get your co-op hire approved in WhitWorks by both your co-op and career advisor and your co-op supervisor at the place that you're working.
So, and then once you have a specific job offer and it's been approved, you'll be in a position to apply for curricular practical training, CPT work authorization, which is the authorization you need to be able to legally do a mandatory co-op. And primarily what we're going to be talking about today is how to get a mandatory co-op job offer and the work permission you need to do that. Then once you've applied and your application has been processed by International Student Services, most likely that will be by Dina Rubin. We will send you an email that your CPT has been approved. CPT is approved by issuing you a new I-20. And once you have that, if you don't already have a social security number, you'll be eligible to apply for one.
Great. So in terms of searching for your co-op, it's important to be in regular contact with your co-op and career advisor because they're a great resource. They will take a look at your resume, give you access to search for co-ops on WhitWorks. They'll teach you about using other job boards to search for co-op. And they can help you reach out to various connections, including professors, Wentworth alumni, using LinkedIn and other tools to support your search. It's also important to be organized. Students have found it really useful to kind of set aside time every week to do their search, maybe an hour every week, and keep track of the positions that you're applying for, either through an Excel spreadsheet or whatever you're most comfortable with. And it is really important to adhere to the deadlines, both for reporting your co-op and for the actual co-op employment. Anything you want to add to that, Jean Marie?
Just that it's important to begin your job search very early because it's important that you do have a co-op job. As international students, you know that you're required to attend school full-time each semester. A mandatory co-op is what qualifies you as being a full-time student. So if you don't have a co-op job, that not only can cause you academic problems, it can also cause you immigration problems. So planning ahead and making sure that you have a job offer is really important.
Yes, I agree. Starting early is key. So if you haven't started yet, now is definitely the time. There's 3 months left, but it does take that long to find a co-op. So here are some keys to success with professional contacts. So it's good to develop relationships, make connections, and network using LinkedIn. And your co-op and career advisor can help you set up a LinkedIn profile if you don't have one already. It's important in American job search to be on time. not just for interviews, but for any communications with professionals for the job itself. And being on time means about 5 minutes early of when you said you're going to be there. So that's super important. It's good to practice or to think about speaking about your interests and accomplishments, anytime you're networking, during interviews, and while on co-op. Be ready to kind of make small talk about weather, about traffic. These are things that people kind of talk about. It's important not to stop searching until you have accepted a co-op offer. But once you have accepted a co-op offer, you definitely need to stop. There's no, like, once you accept an offer, you can't go back and just say, I've changed my mind, I'm gonna do a different co-op. Once you accept something, you have to go along with that, because it's really a bad practice to change your mind about accepting a co-op offer. Any questions so far? And again, you can put those in the chat, or take yourself off mute if you have a question.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I know that I've heard of students, I think especially international students, sometimes not being quite sure if an official offer has been made or if they've accepted it. So, somebody might say, an interviewer might say, we'll be in touch or something along those lines. And if the interview went very well, the student might think, oh, great, I have an offer, and stop looking. At what point, what's sort of the signal to the student that it really is time to start looking, or that they should continue looking?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's true. Employers can be a little bit vague. Even when setting up an interview, they may say it's just setting up a time to talk, but that's an interview. And you do need to, follow the interview protocols, use our interview prep handout, send a follow-up thank you email after the interview. And then once they extend you an offer, if they'll say something like, we'd like to offer you the position, or when let's figure out when you can start, or something like that. And if you're not sure, it's definitely a great idea to ask your co-op and career advisor. And often they'll also send you a written offer that you need to sign and send back. That most companies will do that, so that shows it's an official written offer that you've received. So that's the best indication. Does that help?
Thanks for answering it. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So discussing your status with employers. So what if employer asks, are you work authorized? So the key with this is that you do have authorization to work for your co-op. Employers don't need to do anything different to sponsor you or anything for your co-op. So you are completely authorized to work for your co-op. Sometimes they'll ask a question like, are you now or will you in the future need sponsorship? And if they do ask that question, you have to say yes, that you would need sponsorship in the future. But again, employers won't need to do anything that they wouldn't do for an American student for you for co-op. And it's also important when you are offered the job to make sure that you are working within the semester dates. I sent there are some new dates, and those will be on the slide in a few slides for the spring co-op, because the spring semester did get pushed back. So it's really important that you're working within those semester dates. It may take a couple weeks to get a social security card. So it's important that as soon as you have an offer, that you submit all your paperwork to ISS, so that process goes smoothly and quickly.
I'm going to put in another plug for that right now, because that is a very important point. I know that the Social Security Administration offices have been closed, and honestly, we can't guarantee at all how long it will take to get a Social Security number, or even that the means to apply is consistent across the different offices. So it is absolutely to your advantage to have your co-op job, your CPT, I-20, and be applying for a Social Security number as early as you possibly can, because it could take quite a while. Students have definitely had issues with that.
That's good to know. So in terms of whether employers sponsor H-1Bs, a good resource is myvisajobs.com to take a look and see if employers have petitioned for H-1Bs in the past and for what job titles. And when you're thinking about, taking a co-op and whether it would turn into a full-time job after graduation, it's not really something you should ask the employer outright. It's really something more that you have to research, and your co-op and career advisor can help with this as well. But it is important to think about, the short-term goals of getting a co-op, as well as the long-term goals, and kind of have that conversation with your co-op and career advisor to decide whether a co-op is a good fit for you. It's also important, I think I meant to say this on one of the previous slides, to have a couple of different plans, a plan A, a plan B. Maybe you're conducting a search in the United States. Maybe you're also conducting a co-op search in your home country. Depends on whether that's available to you. But it is important to have a backup plan and discuss that with your co-op and career advisor as soon as possible, so you know what the options are. Questions about that? Oh, I see. Is there something in the chat? Where is the chat? I can't see the chat. Can you see the chat, Jean Marie?
I just clicked on it. It looks like there is a question. Do you see it?
Yes. Are there any alternatives for F1 students if anyone is not able to find a job given the current world circumstances? That is a great question. So the past 2 semesters, so this past fall and this past summer, we offered several different new creative co-op options for students due to the pandemic. And we are working on the details of those for spring, and we will have more information about that forthcoming. I believe we'll be offering similar opportunities for students as backup options. But the plan A for everyone is to apply for external co-ops through WITWorks and other job boards and try to land a position prior to the deadline. Great question. So if you're doing your co-op abroad, you would still need to register for co-op in LeperWeb just like you would any other class, and report your hire in WITWorks to get credit, no matter where you're going for co-op. So those 2 steps are really important. Registering for co-op in LeperWeb, reporting your hire in WITWorks, no matter where you're going on co-op. If you're going outside the United States, you still need to submit your approved report of hire to ISS before leaving the United States, or if you already are outside of the United States, before starting your co-op. If you are considering working within the United States at any point, it is a really great experience to get a co-op within the United States, not only for the experience of conducting an American job search, but also to get those references of other people within the industry in the United States.
Ria, can I jump in for just a moment too?
Yeah.
For the second point, if your co-op is outside the US, yes, it's important to follow the dates and deadlines. CPT authorization is not required in most instances if you're doing your co-op outside the US. What's different this time around, this year, is if you are going to be outside the US, but you have a US employer, you will probably still need CPT. Normally what we tell students is, well, if you're doing your co-op abroad, you physically will not be here, and we assume that your employer isn't in the US, and so you don't need US work permission. But because so many students are doing things remotely, including co-ops, it's possible that you'd be outside the US, but working for an American company and getting paid, and therefore you would still need CPT. So just please keep that in mind, because we want to be careful that you don't work without authorization. If both you and your co-op employer are outside the US, then we would need WITWORKS. You would need to provide the approved WITWORKS and be registered for co-op, but you would not need to apply for CPT. And when I say we, I mean International Student Services, either myself or Dina.
Great, thanks for that clarification, Jean Marie.
Sure.
All right, so in terms of your spring co-op search, you know, we are into November now, so hopefully you have already created a resume and met with your co-op and career advisor and started applying for jobs. If not, please do start applying for jobs and doing some follow-up. It's important once you do submit applications to follow up on those applications 2 or 3 weeks afterwards. And interviews should begin November, December, even into January, interviews can happen. And then as soon as registration for spring begins, which I believe is towards the end of November, you should register for co-op and Leopard Web, just so everyone knows that you will be registered for spring. It's very important to do that as soon as registration opens. And then December through January, you'll be evaluating offers from companies, accepting job and accepting co-op. If you have not heard back from employers, if you are not getting interviews, if you haven't got an offer, it's very important to reach out to your co-op and career advisor for support, okay? So if you've applied to about 40 positions by the end of November and haven't heard back from anybody, please do reach out to your co-op and career advisor. Even if, you know, if you've applied to only 20, it's important to keep them updated and get an understanding of what you could be doing to increase your chances of landing a co-op. As soon as you accept an offer, you'll report that co-op hire through WITWORKS and submit your CPT application materials to ISS and apply for your social security number. So here are those deadlines that I was talking about. So as an international student, the earliest day that you can start co-op is January 19th. Okay, you can't start before that because that's the day the semester starts, and you have to work only during the semester. You have to submit your CPT application to ISS by January 26th at the latest. Okay, that's the last possible day to submit your paperwork. That's also the last
Please
day.
remember that earlier is better.
Earlier is better.
Please remember that earlier is better for us and for you as the student.
Yes. And the 26th is also the last day to register for co-op on Leopard Web. So the sooner you do that, the better as well. February 1st is the last day to start co-op. So you cannot do a co-op that starts after February 1st. So if you have so you need to start co-op between January 19th and February 1st. That's the window of time when you can start your co-op. In terms of the end of co-op, you work through April 27th. That's the last day of co-op. It's the last day of the spring semester. And at the end of your co-op, in order to pass the class, co-op is a pass-fail class. You must complete an evaluation, and your employer must complete an evaluation on you as well. And those are due April 16th. Any questions about that? I'm checking the chat. Okay. I can't see everyone's faces, so if anyone's raising their hand or something, I can't see. So sorry. Okay. So it is very important to adhere to those deadlines that I just outlined. And your co-op and career advisor should also have emailed you those deadlines. I think I sent all my students deadlines yesterday so that you have them and you can stick to them. If you miss the deadlines, you will not be considered a student for the term. You could be withdrawn from Wentworth. You could lose your F1 student status. You may not be able to graduate in time. It's very important that you stick to these deadlines. I'm going to go back. Let's look at these deadlines again. Submit your paperwork by January 26th. That's the last day to submit it. You have to start work between January 19th and February 1st. Okay? Very important.
Let me also just chime in. Thank you, Ria, for emphasizing this. I can tell you, students, we have definitely had other students in the past, and actually there were a couple this semester who are abroad, who forgot to either take care of the paperwork to do a co-op for the fall semester, or withdraw. And unfortunately, we wound up having to report to the Department of Homeland Security that they had violated their F1 status. So even if you're outside the US, if you don't tell us what's going on, we may have to do something that we really do not want to do, meaning report that you violated your status. If you haven't registered and you haven't told us and then withdrawn, if you've done nothing, that's a violation, that's a problem. So if for some reason you're really not able to get any kind of co-op, including the one that Ria was just talking about, which is remote and with a faculty member on campus, please, please, please stay in touch with myself or Dina, or both of us, because we can help you to avoid violating your status. It's one thing to not be able to get a co-op. That doesn't have to mean that you lose your status, but it can.
Yes, very important to be in communication with us as well in terms of your co-op and career advisor, because we can help you. Don't struggle in the dark.
Right.
Don't struggle alone.
Right.
Okay,
We are here to help.
that's right. So these are your helpful resources, your international student advisors. So people in ISS, they should be the only people to answer questions about CPT. Co-op and career advisors can answer questions about searching for the co-op, about speaking with employers, and you can actually schedule phone or Zoom appointments with us by calling this number, 617-989-4101, or through WitWorks. There's a counseling appointment tab in WitWorks that you can use. This is a great resource, dreambridgepartners.com. And again, My Visa Jobs is really cool because you can see employers who petitioned for H-1B and the job titles and stuff like that. Any questions about any of that? All right, take it away, Jean Marie.
Okay, thanks. So what we want to talk about next is basically the application process for curricular practical training, CPT, which is the work authorization that you need in order to do your co-op with a US employer. You need this whether you're being paid or not, whether you're getting any kind of compensation or not. So foreign citizens in the U.S. must follow the regulations and laws of the U.S. That's pretty obvious. We've been telling you that since you arrived. Each individual is responsible for understanding and following the regulations. The point of mentioning this is that I want you to understand that you as the student are responsible for understanding the regulations that apply to you. Dina and I are here to answer your questions, to help you. We're a really important resource. But in the end, you are responsible for maintaining your own status. And I just want to be sure you understand that. And as Ria has mentioned, so if you do have a question, please check with either me or Dina, or some of you may also know David Dardanelli is also able to answer some of your questions. And also please keep in mind that CPT is a benefit of F1 status. It's not a right. You're not necessarily entitled to it. It's a benefit that if you're eligible for, we can grant it. So I think that all of you are already familiar with this. It's something we talked about at orientation when you first started school at Wentworth. But just as a reminder that any off-campus employment without prior authorization is a violation of your F1 student status, that Wentworth is required to report to the Department of Homeland Security. And that includes mandatory co-op employment. So just keep that in mind, that you do need your CPT authorization before you report to a co-op site or begin a co-op remotely, or do anything at all for your co-op once you have accepted it. And in order to get paid for a co-op, in addition to CPT work authorization, you do also need to have a social security number.
I have a question, Jean Marie. If a student's doing an unpaid co-op, they don't need a social security number, right?
They do not. However, F1 students are only eligible to apply for a social security number if they have work authorization. So, and we will issue the CPT I-20 even for an unpaid co-op. So it is an opportunity to get a social security number if you don't already have one. You will only ever have one social security number in your lifetime. That's true for all of us. So I want to emphasize that it is confidential. Don't just share it randomly. Don't put it as a part of your email signature. I've seen students do that. You want to guard it. You are eligible to apply for a social security number if you have CPT. So even if you're not getting paid, you might want to use that opportunity, but you don't have to.
That's good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a question.
Okay.
So let's say I got an offer. So can I accept the offer first and then apply for the CPT, or do I apply for the CPT first and then accept the offer?
You accept the offer so that the job is secured, and then complete all the paperwork that you need to submit for CPT.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Right. And you need to allow, you'll see this, I'll get to this, but you need to allow at a minimum 4 to 5 business days from when you turn in a complete application for CPT until the start date of your co-op. So if you get a great offer and you want to accept it, great, congratulations, but don't tell them that you can start tomorrow or the next day. You need to allow enough time for Dina and I to process your CPT application.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
okay, sure. Good question. So overall, practical training is temporary work authorization to get practical experience in your major field of study. So in your major, all practical training employment must be directly related to your major. The two types of practical training are curricular practical training, which, as we've been saying, is what you get for doing a mandatory co-op. And the other type is optional practical training, which most of you are probably more familiar with. And that's the work permission you need to do an optional co-op, or you may be more familiar with it in the context of staying and working for a year after you graduate. And I will talk a little bit about OPT after I've talked about CPT.
Got a question.
Okay.
If we find a co-op for 6 months, is there a way to like, if the time of the co-op it's 6 months, could it be counted as 2 co-ops, or it only counts as one?
It would probably have to be 2 because Wentworth co-op, mandatory co-ops, and I'm assuming you're talking about mandatory co-ops. Wentworth mandatory co-ops are normally 4 months, or they might be a couple of weeks less than that. We cannot authorize CPT to allow you to work for 6 months to meet a 4-month employment requirement. We can't do that. So, you know, it might need to be more like 7 months for 2 co-ops, if that were agreeable, if that could be worked out with the co-ops and careers office, if it, you know, met their requirements too. But 6 months for 1 co-op would not be a possibility.
Right, and it's only would be feasible for certain majors, because most majors have a specific track of when they go on co-op and when they do classes. So for example, for spring, if you're going on co-op, typically you do classes in the summer, and those classes start up in May, and you can't be doing classes and co-op at the same time. So you'd have to work it out with your academic advisor with the classes that you've taken and that you have yet to take, to see if that would actually work, because you don't want to have to extend your graduation date, which would mess up your is it the I-20 possibly, that it could, yeah.
Right.
So it is really important, if that's something you're considering, to have a conversation now with your academic advisor and your co-op and career advisor to see if that would be a possibility, because it may not be possible for some majors.
The thing is, in my case, I've got to do co-op in the spring and the summer.
I see.
So in that case, it would work for me as well.
It sounds as though it might, but it would probably need to be more like a 7 or 8 month co-op that would be, for the entire spring semester and then for the entire summer semester. And what you would do is you would need to apply for CPT one semester at a time. We don't authorize it, all at once for 7 or 8 months. It would be you're enrolled in co-op, mandatory co-op for the spring semester, 4 months. And we authorize that. And then again for the spring, first for the spring and then for the summer semester, we would do it again.
All right, thank you so much.
Sure. That's great that you have a potential employer who would keep you for that long.
I hope so.
Yeah, good luck.
Thanks.
Okay,
right.
so next slide.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so some more details about CPT. As I've said, it's the work permission you need to do a mandatory co-op. Definitely you need to have your CPT authorization you'll get it in writing on a new I-20. It will print out on page 2 of a new I-20. You need to have that I-20 in your possession before you begin your mandatory co-op. And that means before going there in person, if you're not doing a remote co-op, and before officially beginning the co-op, if you're doing it remotely. To be eligible for CPT, you need to have been in valid F1 status for at least 2 semesters before the co-op semester. And I can't ask for a show of hands really, but if anyone has taken a gap year, left and then come back again and started their F1 status over again, that's perfectly fine. But the clock starts ticking for those 2 semesters of classes that you need to do before you become eligible to apply for work permission when you return. So if you have been here straight through and taking classes, great, then this shouldn't be an issue. But if you are a junior now and you took a year off and this fall is your first semester back, you're actually not going to be eligible for CPT until you've done 1 more semester of classes. So hopefully that doesn't apply to anyone, but just in case it does, you should be aware of that. And if you have a question about that afterward, I'm happy to talk about it. So you have to have been here in valid F1 status for at least 2 semesters immediately prior to beginning the CPT. You need to be approved for a specific co-op job by your co-op advisor and your co-op employer. I wanted to say something else about that. Oh, and that's because your CPT is employer specific. We're going to write the name of your employer and that company's address right on the I-20 that gives you permission to work. And then you also need to be officially registered in Leopard Web for co-op, and make sure that you're registered for the correct course number, co-op 3500 or co-op 4500. Next slide. So the steps are to register in Leopard Web for the correct co-op, get a job offer and have it approved officially by your co-op employer and your co-op advisor. And you should be, registration hasn't opened yet, so you should definitely be looking for a job, interviewing, sending out your resume, talking to your co-op advisor. And if you get an offer that you want to accept, I believe, Ria, that they can do that.
Yep.
Even though registration hasn't opened yet.
That's fine.
Okay, good. And then get it approved in WebWorks. And then as soon as registration in Leopard Web does open, register, and you're ahead of the game, which is really nice. Takes some pressure off you. And then once those 2 steps have been taken care of, you need to put together your CPT application. That consists of a CPT application form, and I'm actually going to send these things to you either after we finish this session or tomorrow. So the CPT application form, a printout of your WITWORKS co-op agreement showing approval of this particular job by your co-op advisor and your employer. It'll also have the start and end dates and the date, the physical location of the co-op and things like that. And the next slide. Other parts of the CPT application are a supplemental co-op approval form. This asks for some information that's the same as on the WITWORKS form, but it also asks for some additional information. And you need to fill this out basically so that you don't have to have your co-op employer do anything for you that they would not be doing for an American student. We have found that that's really helpful. We don't want to put any barriers up to you guys as international students getting jobs. So the supplemental co-op approval form, just be sure that the co-op start and end dates and the employer name and address match exactly with the WITWORKS co-op agreement. If not, we're going to have to ask you to clarify which is correct because we put that exact information on the I-20 itself. If you have not applied for CPT through Wentworth before, please include, in addition to the other items listed on the application form, a copy of each of your previously issued I-20s, including from any school in the US that you've attended in F1 status. We want to collect all of that. If this is your second co-op through Wentworth and you have been approved for CPT by International Student Services previously, then we already have those and we don't need you to provide them again. Also, and a really important part of the application is your I-94 record showing your most recent entry into the US, that it was in F1 status for duration of status, and a copy of your most recent passport showing the expiration date and your picture. Usually that's all on one page. It's the identity page. Okay, next slide. You should submit all of these documents to International Student Services. You'll email them to Dina. This says 5 business days. It should say not less than 4 business days. And what you're going to do is email a, you should save everything in your
OneDrive.
account,
Sorry.
your OneDrive
You know,
account.
all the changes I made to this didn't come through for some reason. I apologize for that.
That's okay. So yeah, you'll save all of those documents, that list that I just went down, into your Wentworth OneDrive and send a link to those documents to Dina Rubin at rubind@wit.edu. Her contact information was on the, I think it was the second slide. So you have it with this. Once your new I-20 authorizing CPT has been issued, Dina will email you to schedule a Zoom meeting so that she can go over a few more details with you, and she will send you the CPT I-20. So you're in the middle of classes now. You should be actively looking for a co-op job. We understand that you're going to want to take some time off over the holidays. Completely understandable, and I'm sure it's hard-earned time off. Please keep in mind that by the time the spring semester begins, so by the first day of classes, if you have not accepted a job offer, a co-op job offer, you are expected to be full-time looking for a job offer, okay? You don't necessarily have to be back in the Boston area because you may be doing a co-op remotely anyway, but by the first day of classes, at the very latest, you're expected to be fully engaged in a job search so that you will have a co-op job offer by the deadlines that Ria has already talked about.
Hi, sorry, I just have a quick question. in the PowerPoint, it said that the oh no, my
That's
bad. I
okay.
read something
Are you sure you don't
bad.
have a
No,
question?
sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide. Yes, please keep in mind that it's usually not possible to extend your CPT dates once your new I-20 has been issued. So basically, if your co-op advisor signs off on dates that are a little bit shorter than the normal full length of the semester, that advisor is saying that you can meet the co-op requirement during that slightly shorter period of time. It may be because of the co-op employer. There could be a number of reasons for it. If you then decide, oh, but I really like this employer and I want to keep working, I want the money, I want to learn more, I want to finish a project, it's hard to get that end date extended. So I recommend that you put as your last date of employment the very last possible date. If you finish a few days before that, if you finish a project, etc., it's not necessarily a problem if you finish a little bit early, but getting an extension is definitely more difficult. You would have to justify it, and you would have to get a signed letter from your co-op advisor and from your employer, etc., etc. So that's a tip, an important tip. And again, please make sure that the dates of employment and the employer information on your supplemental co-op approval form and WITWORKS, that they match exactly. So yeah, next slide. Okay, any questions, any additional questions about CPT or mandatory co-op? Okay, we'll give you a chance to ask questions about anything we talked about at the end, but okay, then if there are no questions, Ria, is there anything in the chat about that? I didn't see
Nope,
anything.
I don't
Okay.
see anything.
Okay, all right, then I'll move on to optional practical training. OPT is work authorization for students who want to work off campus doing something directly related to their major, but that doesn't necessarily meet the requirements of a mandatory co-op. So it could be because the dates don't work out, or it's not full time, but you want to get this experience. So this is the government's way of allowing for that. Any work that you do on OPT still does have to be directly related to your major. You need for a recommendation for OPT, and what we would do is if you're eligible, we would again issue an I-20, but the I-20 would recommend that we think the government should give you this work permission. Schools do not have the authority to give you OPT, to grant OPT, the way they do have the authority to grant CPT. One of the things that means is that it's a much longer application process. The time frame is much longer, but I'll talk about that a little later. I'm sorry, our pictures are covering up some of what's on here, but please keep in mind, as with CPT, that before reporting to a co-op site or beginning remote co-op employment, I'm sorry, not co-op, but OPT employment, you need to be fully approved by the Department of Homeland Security to work. You can submit an application up to 90 days before your planned start date. Keep in mind that it is taking the government about 4 months to process applications. So it will take Wentworth International Student Services about a week, maybe a little bit more, depending on the time of year, to recommend your OPT, but the government is then taking about 4 months to process applications. So just, plan in advance. Next slide.
Yes, I just want to add, this is optional practical training. OPT is also for optional co-op. So if anyone was considering, usually summer, an optional co-op, this is the process you'd have to go through. So for that, you do need to apply now for summer. And for OPT, you have to know the employer before you can apply, right?
No.
Oh,
Why
no.
don't- Go to the
Okay,
next slide and I'll,
sorry.
and that may cover some of what you're talking about.
Okay, sorry.
Right, so this is a little bit of a comparison between OPT and CPT, CPT being what we had just talked about. So yeah, whereas with CPT, you do need a specific job offer. With OPT, you do not. Again, any work that you do on OPT must be directly related to your major, but you can apply without a job offer. You have to, as with CPT, have been in valid F1 status for at least an academic year immediately before applying. As I mentioned, it's recommended by International Student Services, but it's approved. The decision is made by the government, US Citizenship and Immigration Services. The maximum amount of time that you can apply to the government before you want to begin working is 3 months. So there's a little bit of a contradiction there. If you're not allowed to apply more than 90 days before you want to begin employment and it's taking them 4 months, that's kind of an issue. But unfortunately, that's not something they've been willing to address, and it's not something that schools can do anything about. So just something to keep in mind. OPT is limited to a total of 12 months. And you can use some of it before you graduate, you can save all of it for after you graduate, or you can do a combination of the two. Either way is perfectly fine. OPT before you graduate is limited to part-time during the school year, or you could do it full-time during a vacation semester. So for freshmen and sophomores during the summer. For juniors and seniors, that would be harder. And during a vacation semester, it can be either full or part-time. But whatever OPT you use of those 12 months before you graduate does get deducted from the total of 12 months, and you only will have a certain amount left available to you for after you graduate. So some students do want to save the whole 12 months for after they graduate. The application fee and the government form, the form I-765, has changed several times over the last year or two. And so we give you the website to go to check the fee. I believe right now it's still $410 and that it's going to be going up, but it is expensive to apply for OPT. So just something to plan for in advance. Any questions about any of that so far? Okay, Ria, why don't you go to the next slide? I can't remember if there's anything else in here about OPT. Can you go back one? I just want to see if there's anything else I wanted to mention about OPT. No, again, just keep in mind that you can use OPT for an optional co-op, but you don't have to be registered for an optional co-op in order to be able to do OPT. You can, so the student who is asking about doing a 6-month co-op, if you wanted to work for that company for 6 months part-time, you could get OPT and you could do that, and it wouldn't have to be necessarily that you're registered for a co-op. It's perfectly legal for you to work on OPT doing something directly related to your study on a part-time basis during the school year while you're in classes. And part-time means 20 hours per week or fewer. So, okay. Social Security numbers, as I mentioned, you will only ever have one Social Security number in your life, so do be careful with it. We don't want you to be the victim of identity theft. You can only get it through the Social Security Administration, and you're only eligible to apply for one while you have work authorization. It's been more difficult to get a Social Security number because of the pandemic. Most of the offices are still closed. I know they're not consistent from location to location in terms of their hours and how you can apply and things like that. So what I would recommend is that you, even while you're in your co-op job search, check out the website of the Social Security Administration to see where you might want to apply and what their requirements are and how long it's taking to get a Social Security number. You won't be able to apply until you've been approved for CPT, but if you're ready to apply the moment you have your CPT I-20, that may be helpful to you. And this is sort of the normal application process. Again, go to the website. You'll need to show your CPT I-20, when you apply. There's an application. You'll need to show your I-94 record that shows you're in F1 status, and you'll need a copy of your passport. So go to their site for updates. And a few reminders. Please, if you haven't begun your job search yet, it's definitely time. It is no longer early. Submit your CPT application at least 4 business days or a week before you want to begin your co-op. Longer, more advanced is better. It's better for you and for us. There are co-op employers that will not allow you to begin work without both your CPT I-20 and a Social Security number. So if you only apply for CPT a week before you want to begin your co-op, you're not allowing enough time to get both your new I-20 and a Social Security number. So earlier is always better. And if your co-op is outside the US, meaning both you and your co-op employer are outside of the US, you'll still need to be registered for co-op in Leopard Web and submit your approved WITWorks to International Student Services by the CPT application deadline. And as I mentioned earlier, you do need to be completely focused on finding a co-op job by the first day of classes in the spring semester if you haven't already accepted a job. Yeah, I don't know if there's, oh, okay. More reminders. Yes, please be sure to update either myself or Dina with any change to your legal name, your major, your source of funding, right away. And if you move, whether it's between, well, anytime that you move, but students often move between semesters, or when they go out on co-op, you might be moving to a different part of the country. You need to let us know within 10 days of that move. That's a requirement of your F1 status. So please do that. You can do it by emailing us or updating Leopard Web, and that will come into our system. And then we will update the government with your new address. And please be sure to check your Wentworth email account on a regular basis. We try not to write to you all the time. We know you're busy with other things. So when we do write to you, we hope that you will take a moment to read it and respond if that's what's appropriate. And that would be true for emails from International Student Services and your co-op advisors.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
So we will have time for questions. I just want to show this screen again with our contact information. There's Dina's email, like Jean Marie was saying, in terms of sending her your OneDrive link with all of your CPT application materials. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and stop recording.